And I'm the Executive Director of Sister Cities of Nashville. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for what is hopefully an educational, cultural, and knowledge-based exchange this evening. The mission of Sister Cities is to connect the people of Nashville to the people of the world, promoting peace through mutual respect, understanding, and cooperation, one person and one community at a time. Tonight, we're connecting you to our sister city in Mendoza, Argentina, through the work of a very talented filmmaker and director, Tato Moreno. A connection that has been made possible through the collaboration and efforts of several different people and communities, including the Nashville Area Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Lipscomb Professor Ted Parks, FilmCon, NECAT, and so many others. So thank you so much. A huge thank you to all of Sister Cities sponsors. You will see that either at the beginning or the ending of this program. There's too many to list. We have a lot of them. We're so thankful for that. And a huge thank you to everyone here and everyone watching at home. I'm going to turn it over to our Mendoza City co-chair, Tina Deloach, to get us started. Thank you.
Hello. We welcome everyone to the first hybrid event with Sister Cities. I'm Tina Deloach, and I'm co-chair of the Mendoza City Committee. Nashville's been my home for almost 40 years, but I am from Mendoza, Argentina. So I welcome all of you here in the studio tonight and all of everybody that's online, and I also welcome everybody remotely from Mendoza. When we started this virtual programming in 2020, we had no idea what was going to lead us, but I'm happy to say that there's been a silver lining with this virtual programming, and it's kept us connected thus far, which of course is why we're all here tonight. The Nashville and Mendoza relationship officially began in 2019, thus celebrating over 10 years. But this connection has been working together for over 15 years. This relationship has been honored many times with trips to each other's cities, cultivating a mutual respect through warm hospitality. I am personally encouraged to see the active support of the educational exchange that gives young individuals an opportunity to broaden their worldview. Tonight, we all have the opportunity to connect with Mendoza through a beautifully captured film, which I hope you are able to watch. But if you are not, please enjoy meeting its director, Tato Moreno. And I trust you will sense the warmth and dignity of the Argentine people through his work and through this presentation. I want to thank NECAT, the Nashville Area Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, FilmCon, Professor Ted Parks, and filmmaker Tato Moreno, and so many of you here at home and abroad. None of this would have been possible without you and the friendships with our sister cities. And now, Mark, you can begin our panel.
Join us, whether you're here in person or whether you're online or watching us on television. I am Mark Brown. I am a Nashville area writer, producer, actor, and I am the newest member of the NECAT board. I'm also your moderator for tonight, and I hope this is a very informative and fascinating discussion of documentary filmmaking. So I'm going to start things by asking our panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves and kind of connect the dots of who's talking to you tonight. So Yuri, we'll begin with you. If you'll tell us a little bit about the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and you and the work that you do.
Hello, everybody. And internationally also, hola a todos que nos están escuchando desde lugares tan remotos realmente como Argentina, Mendoza. He tenido la oportunidad de estar ahí. Yo hace muchos años, de joven, saludos a todos los que nos escuchan en los países hispanohablantes. I am Yuri Kunza. I'm a CEO of the Nashville Area Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, a 22-year-old organization that empowers the Hispanic entrepreneur in our market. And we, thanks to the initiative and actually invitation to have us at the table from FilmCon, Andy Van Room, who is also a panelist tonight. He's going to tell why and how this came about. We venture into Cine TV Latino, which is a opportunity for filmmakers from the Spanish-speaking countries to have a voice and have also an opportunity to um, connect with the mainstream film industry in the United States, but also around the world. Our organization, as I said earlier, is a Hispanic business membership organization. We have about 300 plus members, but the Hispanic entrepreneur community in Nashville is over 1,500 now. So there's a lot more work to do recruiting, but we're happy to be here. And we know it's an emerging market, and also it's a place where, like the whole United States is, in which Hispanics have a role and have been instrumental, serving as the backbone of the economic prosperity for America. And that's what we believe and we know, because there is no Hispanic here that is coming to, I don't know, going to visit the Dollywood or anything. They are here as part of the fabric and the infrastructure of America, helping make this country successful, grow, and bring every opportunity for everybody else. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. And we also have with us Mr. Andy Van Roon with film.com. If you'll tell us a little bit about you and your organization, Andy.
Thank you. And hello, my friend Yuri. He and Lorraine are the reasons that I'm involved with this evening. Lorraine Segovia Paz. I am essentially a writer, executive producer, sometimes producing, and but in this city, most of my work has been involved with FilmCom in the last 12 years. FilmCom is a packaging, financing, and distribution market. It is analogous to something called the American film market, which takes place in Santa Monica, California. The American film market is primarily a sales event where projects are already in the can, and there are sales forces at work. But what we set up with FilmCom here in Tennessee is really the first of its type anywhere, which is a development market for new feature film, new scripted television, new unscripted television, and new documentary projects. So we've kind of put them all under one roof, and we fly in executives from LA and New York and everywhere else to meet with content creators in our community and Tennessee. And some of the content creators come in from other countries. We've actually had them from Argentina and Australia and Europe and Canada. So, we're essentially set up to, establish relationships. Nobody at these kinds of events comes to write a check, but what they will do is establish long-term business relationships. And if we bring 30 to 40 executives to Nashville that are involved in this, then our basic hope is that relationships are established that can be beneficial for years to come, because that's how our industry works. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. If you two could give us a little more information. So how does Cine TV Latino and FilmCom work together?
I'll let Yuri start with that one. Yuri?
Well, I mean, it's not it's just the voices of the Spanish-speaking communities are not so much present in the United States, unfortunately. And we see that even reflected on how many Latino actors are part of the narrative filmmaking in the U.S. So we thought, and thanks, Andy, for creating this opportunity for all of us. And I also had to commend the efforts of our co-chair in Cine TV Latino, Lorraine Segovia Paz, who was very instrumental in identifying those voices from the Latin American countries that were the leading voices on this to help tell the story that is not often told. And that's probably very unknown in the United States. So I think this is the beginning of something that is I think it's going to be very innovative for the whole country, for here in the United States, because at least that we know. I know there are efforts here and there, but I think this is a concerted effort to bring very relevant, prominent, leading voices from all the Spanish-speaking communities in the world, not only Central and South America, but anywhere else where Spanish is spoken, or other languages, and then incorporate them into what, or expose them to, and have people be exposed to from the mainstream film, television, and transmedia and multimedia communities.
Well, all I'll add to that is that Yuri and I have been discussing Cine TV Latino for a while. Even though I have long hair, which should be cut, my primary interest is in pragmatic events and pragmatic undertakings. So the whole discussion with FilmCom and Cine TV Latino is to try from our end to bring more pragmatic tools and connections to those that are in the wanting to create things in the Spanish-speaking market. As Yuri was saying, they could be created for people who speak Spanish or Spanish-speaking filmmakers, or even, quite frankly, Portuguese. Those are in Brazil. We count them among the entities we're looking at. So, but I think that film finance these days, first of all, financing a feature film is different than financing a scripted television series. And and packaging that is different than packaging an unscripted series, and all that is different than trying to put together a documentary, as I'm sure our guest artist can go into, or will go into. But the main thing that I think that Yuri and I have been discussing with Lorraine Segovia Paz is to just try to fuse together the artistic and cultural with the practical and financing side, so that we can help get certain things off the ground. I'll leave it at that for now.
Actually, you did a good job of kind of answering my follow-up question. I'll see if Yuri has anything to add. How would this collaboration specifically help a story like Tato's? How would you help bridge the gaps between these communities and help get that done?
I mean, many of the things, what is happening here I think we live in a world that is sophisticated but disconnected. And we have all these tools to connect, but we're not really connected. And even in the United States, we see that there is this tension between communities. And it's because people don't know. They have I always said, I don't blame anyone who has grown up seeing examples of where the Hispanic community is, or members of the Hispanic community, I don't know, maybe gardeners, housekeeping, I don't know, the restaurant, kitchen sort of personnel. That's great. I mean, they're great jobs that are very essential, very, very, very important. But I cannot blame you, because that's the only thing people have seen, and in Nashville especially. So I will just say straightforward, that has happened to me. People don't see a Hispanic perhaps being a filmmaker. I thought you could be many things, but not a filmmaker. So the situation is, what we experience is because why we're not connected is because we don't know, we didn't have the opportunity to be exposed to things. And I think through the work of people like Tato and other filmmakers that can show realities that are current, that exist, that have been around for a long time, we get to learn. So we're being educated. We're enhancing our knowledge about subjects, and that makes us, I think, a more suitable individual to live and enjoy our time. And so we would like to support any effort that can bridge all of those gaps, or bring communities together. I think we also learning how we can fit in here. But I find it fascinating that I feel so enriched just because I get to know a little bit about what Tato is doing, and he's going to tell us more. And I hope you get to see his film and any clips that we have shared with you. about his work because how interesting it is that there are so many things we do not know, and then we go through life thinking that what we experience and have to deal with, that's all there is about it. But there's something beyond, and I think that can enrich you. And I invite you to consider and open up to that opportunity.
Thank you, Yuri. That is a good segue into our guest tonight. Nestor Tato Moreno has been professionally immersed in the film and television industry for more than 25 years, mainly as a producer, director, and editor. He's worked for DirecTV Latin America, ESPN, Asikia TV Public Channel, and as an independent producer. His work has gained recognition both in Argentina and internationally at the Buenos Aires International Documentary Film Festival, the Bariloche Audio Visual Festival, the Yucatan Film Festival, and the Della Licenia Film Festival in Italy. His film Oreo has won 9 international awards and has been viewed by tens of thousands of people since its premiere in Argentina. Moreno has a passion for building high-performance teams, designing the workflow for new departments, restructured whole areas, and, of course, in making documentaries. He lives in Mendoza, Argentina, with his wife, Claudia. So are you with us, Tato?
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much.
Good to see you again, friend. I would like to, if you don't mind, will you start us off by telling us a little bit about your background in filmmaking? Did you go to film school and where, and how did you wind up doing this?
Well, I went to film school in Orange County in California, and we were just talking with Yuri about we are the people that were exposed to film cutting, to work prints, to linear editing before everything changes, especially in post-production. So I'm from those times. I went to school at the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s. I started working mostly in television in California. And always was my passion was documentary. And after doing about 10 years of corporate work and getting a little bit bored of being getting into the executive branch of corporations, working for DirecTV Latin America at that time, finally decided to change totally directions and going back to Mendoza and start making documentaries. And we have a production company, we do many things, but one of those is making documentaries, which is actually my passion.
Well, tell us, how did you get connected with Nashville? And I'm going to go ahead and throw in the first audience question here. We did have an audience question of, do you have any plans to work with the Hispanic community in Nashville moving forward?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would love to. And basically, I think we need to let communities have their own voices. And I think the audiovisual tools are amazing tools that are more and more affordable and possible to reach more people. And the best way to tell the stories, I always say that the best stories are told by the people that live them and know them and are part of them. So I would love to work with this Hispanic areas in Nashville, and I've done that in different countries, but working with especially young people on telling stories and finding the way of using the tools that we have at hand to tell stories. More and more is possible to go through the process of telling stories to documentaries or fictions films with easier than it used to be, especially the ones that we know the past, know how hard it was to just reach a camera to be able to shoot in a weekend when we were at school. Now there are more tools available, and I think it would be great to let many communities to express themselves through film.
Well, we'll hold you to that. Kind of moving into the film a little bit, let me ask you, so what draws you to documentary rather than a narrative style film?
I don't make a division between those anymore. I think it's hard to even separate too much narrative from documentaries. It's not that I don't have interest in fiction films. As a matter of fact, I'm writing one now. But it's that documentaries are, for me, a very direct way to express myself through telling real stories that when I witness them, I need more people to know about it. It's like when something very special happens to you outside the house and you rush back home to tell the people you love what happened. And I have the same feeling when I find stories like Eliseo's family, where people that they are not usually heard, and they don't have the exposure to tell those stories, and they are very meaningful stories. So the motivation mostly is how I can share with other people what really affect me, and what really I feel passionate about it, and that's the motivation for me with the documentaries. And I think as a documentalist, the only and most important task for us is create a bridge between those protagonists and people, audiences, and try to be as transparent as possible in that process so people can feel those stories and they can relate to those protagonists.
That's wonderful. Let's get into a little bit about your vision for Arreo here. And if you would, tell us a little bit about transhumance, what that means. There's some of us here that don't know. And tell us a little bit about the culture that comes with that, because I know there's an ancient culture that surrounds that. And then tell us what drew you to this. Why did you want to tell the world about this?
Okay, and I'm going to do something that I shouldn't do, but I'm going to go back to one part of the question that I didn't answer earlier, because you asked me
fine. No, go ahead.
how I got to be in Nashville. I already feel that I'm in Nashville, although I never visit physically that. And in 2020, I was called, I think was Yuri contacted me to tell me that Cine TV Latino for 2020 was inviting me to a forum, a conversation. That was amazing. It was really enlightening, and it was an amazing experience. And in that at that time, one of the people I met was Lorraine. I also met Ted Parks, and that from there I developed a friendship. And Ted Parks was the one that told me, last year, about a month ago, I said, that Mendoza is a sister city with Nashville. So he contacted me with Sarah, and Sarah was very excited about Arreo too. And right now I feel like I have a family down there. It's like I have good friends that really I'm very thankful. And I really want to thank everybody that is involved in this. From the sister cities like Sarah and Tina, Yuri and Lorraine from the Hispanic Chamber, Mark, Andy, of course, Ted. Thank you, Ted. Thank you for everything you did. We probably would have a little time to talk about the last adventure we had together in Spain, because Ted traveled to Spain to help in a very generous way with the new documentary. So I'm sorry I got away from your question.
That's fine. It's your show.
Thank everybody there because for me it's really moving what's happening now with Nashville and the interest on Arreo and specifically the interest on looking for voices and Hispanic voices. Is something that I really appreciate.
Okay, so now if you'll tell us a little bit about your vision for the film and tell us about transhumance, what that is, where it comes from, the culture that surrounds it.
Well, what happened with Arreo is that, like, one of the things that really love about documentaries is that documentary is a journey. It's a journey of discovery. I always say that there's nothing interesting on going to tell a story that you already know. You know, it's like documentaries are supposed to tell you something. They are supposed to surprise you. They are supposed to enlighten you in many ways. You have always an idea of something you know or you think you know, and then when you go deeply, like anything in life, you start learning many things. And what happened with Arreo was exactly that. In the process, I saw that life was I was very attracted to this way of life. And I, you know, while we were shooting, it was like 2.5 years in different times in the year that I would go for a couple of weeks back. I started discovering this life, and I started discovering that was transhumance. I didn't know. I really want to tell the story about Eliseo's family because I knew what was happening economically with the young people that were living, and you know, the fact that this way of life is very important for the economy on this area. Only in this area, right now, there are 2,000 families living from that way of life. That's a lot in the mountains. So while I was shooting the documentary, I started discovering the value of transhumance. But when I really, really understood that was way after we premiered the movie, and when we went to festivals, and then we start seeing, like in Austria, an audience of mostly Austrian and Germans, you know, they stand up on an ovation with the movie. And we go to Mexico or in the United States and find the same reaction to something that definitely is ancestral, is in our DNA. And that took me to learn more about what transhumance is. And that is an activity that is approximately 7,000 years old. So, wow. and also is still being practiced in many, many parts of the world. And when we went to UNESCO, I'm sorry, I said it in Spanish, but UNESCO is how you say it in English.
I don't know.
But
sorry.
You know,
I think it's UNESCO.
It says it. You say it the same way. Okay.
They're telling me that you nailed it.
In December 2019 was the annual UNESCO meeting on the world, and it happened in Colombia. And in that instance, transhumance was declared patrimonio intangible de la humanidad, intangible patrimony, I think is in English. And we got to project Arreo to project the movie, and it was very interesting. The day that we were projecting the movie, the nights, I see this person in the whole, group of people that from all over the world. But you see this person that came into the movie, and 5 minutes later, it exits the theater, and 10 minutes later, he comes back with another person. And they are in the last row talking the whole movie, but they were speaking a language that I couldn't identify. And so when that finished, I went to them and I asked them in English where they were from. And it was actually the Minister of Culture from Mongolia. And he said, we were talking all the time because everything we saw there, it could be Mongolian. From the way they do the things, they carry the animals, all the elements, the little things that you see how they packed, and even the mountains, it felt like Mongolia. So transhumance is a very universal thing, very important and ancestral. And I discovered that through Arreo's story, and that's why it became now something that we are very interested, because also now is being valued more than ever, because the importance related to biodiversity and many other things that makes a lot of sense, that extensive way of growing animals makes total sense against this intensive, crazy way of feeding animals with anything but natural things.
Right. Yeah. You kind of getting into my next question. You and I talked about this the other day, that, when deciding on what projects to do, any filmmaker has to answer 3 questions. Why this story? Why now? And why am I the one to tell it? So what's the answer to those 3 questions for this movie?
Yeah, I like to ask 3 questions. One is why, or what is the story, and who tells the story? I don't think that totally we, the documentaries, are the ones that tell the story. I like to think that we are a vehicle, a nexus between this, what I said about the audience and the protagonist. Because documentalism is a way of representation. It's a big responsibility of representing somebody else. And something that is very important to ask all the time, I think, is who is telling this story, and then through what mechanisms. Because I think it's very important not to lose the most important thing about stories. That is not how I show myself as a documentalist, but how I can make people to witness what I did. How can I make those protagonists feeling comfortable to be able to transmit what their lives is, for instance. So I'm not sure that we are the ones that we tell the story. We have mechanisms to help that story to go through, and we intervene and we manipulate, of course, and ideologically also we take position, and that's good. We are not mere, just observers of the reality. We really shape it. But I think that we should be very conscious, which means we should keep always the ego in the back, that we are not the most important thing on that process, but the most important thing is the story and their protagonists.
That's a refreshing viewpoint to hear from a filmmaker. A lot of times the ego of the filmmaker kind of comes to the fore. But we're going to show a couple of clips. But before we do that, could you take a little time here and talk about the nuts and bolts of making this film? I mean, you talked about how it's over different seasons. You're leading herds through the mountains, this, that, and the other. Did you embed with these people? I mean, how did you put together a crew? How did you fund it? I mean, how did you make this movie?
In all the projects that I work, I always take a lot of time previous to shooting. I take time to learn and to listen. I always say that I don't do investigation. What I try to do is immersion. I try to live together their lives and try to witness that firsthand, learning from the people that I want to tell the story. Because I think it's impossible to tell the story if we don't get that relationship. Because also something very important in documentaries when we work with people is that we have to build a relationship of trust. Like in any other relationship, that's the most important thing to go through the story. And also because for them, it's a hard journey to make a documentary. And we have to be respectful about that. And also, as a system of representation, I always try to make sure that I'm representing those people as they like to be represented. In the sense that it's very important that I feel like I cannot do that if I don't live that life. So with Eliseo, I spent time going to the mountains with him, learning some of the things that he does, and learning to do things with the animals. And they had a lot of fun, seeing me trying to do things. But they really built a relationship. And we had a lot of talks before I even took the camera. And those talks are the base of the documentaries, because I start filming with Eliseo and Juana, really felt comfortable, but felt comfortable because they trust the process. So I think that previous time is essential in any documentary.
So did you have any outline, any sort of script or anything, or you just went in and shot this and then edited it? Or how?
I always have structure, always. Right. Definitely, I think for any documentary, you have to build a structure. You can, we shouldn't say always, because there are exceptions, but mostly I try to, and it's something that doesn't come up until I have this process of living their lives and trying to live with them and talk to them. Like, for instance, I explained Eliseo what the structure of Arreo was going to be. Mm-hmm. I explained it to him before we start shooting.
Gotcha.
And what I recognized about the story, once I started learning more about it, was like, I really wanted to have a story that had the most simple structure possible. So we decide chronologically the circle of life. When they come, they start with the newborns and they come back at the end when they sell the goats. So structurally, we want to touch that. We say, okay, we're going to go simple because the most important thing is what's happening inside. But also, what happens in those conversations we had with Eliseo, and that we share a lot of ideologically positions related to ownership of the land, the intermediation of the commercializations of the goats, the new roads, the politics or not, from governments, etc. So we did like a list of themes, and we said, Eliseo, we are not going to finish this documentary until we go through all the things that you want to tell. But we won't prepare that. Those are going to come up, and we let them happen. So what happened there is that, sorry? Okay. So what happens there was that Eliseo knew exactly what we were going to do, but also he knew that was going to take time. And we started shaping the documentary like that. It's very interesting in the case of Arreo. I was going there, for a week, 2 weeks, different times on the year, but it took me 2.5 years. But in those 2.5 years, I shot only 62 hours. So in a ratio of the documentary, that's very, very short. Or, people shoot 300 hours for, to have a feature. But that's also a decision. That I don't shoot unless I think I need it, and I enjoy many times of the process not shooting because I think that's important too.
Gotcha. And I think at this point we are going to show a couple of clips.
Okay.
Está desapareciendo el puestero porque hay otras cosas que lo incentivan más, qué sé yo, también el tema de las tierras, que no todas son solucionadas, que no se sientan a dialogar o realmente a conocer lo que es el trabajo de campo, porque yo creo que fuera un concejal. Está desapareciendo el puestero porque hay otras otras cosas que lo incentivan más, qué sé yo, también el tema de las tierras, que no todas son solucionadas, que no se sientan a dialogar o realmente a conocer lo que es el trabajo de campo, porque yo creo que fuera un concejal, por ejemplo, yo puedo hacer proyectos, ideas de lo que es el campo, que es lo que yo conozco, pero yo no voy a ir a hacer un proyecto de la ciudad porque yo en la ciudad no tengo solución. O sea que yo creo que todo lo que se presentan de candidatos, hacerse unos días de viaje como hacemos nosotros, unos días trabajando de parición, unos días en la veranada y saber realmente lo que es el trabajo de campo.
Tato, if you
Ya llevamos 8 días, inclemencia soportando, inclemencia soportando. El trabajo de un puestero, transitar por el camino, transitar por el camino. A los criollos de mi tierra, los que hacen esta patriada, los que hacen esta patriada, hallan mi verso sentido, de mi alma emocionada, de mi alma emocionada.
Ya llegamos y ahora hay que bajar las cabras hasta allá, hasta el Real. Y bueno, ahí se va a quedar, ahí se quedará mi hermano hasta marzo, abril, son 3 meses largos acá en plena cordillera. Yo lamentablemente me tengo que volver a la ciudad.
I've got to tell you, the landscapes are just stunning. They really are. But as we saw in those 2 clips, you've got some major clashes between rural lifestyle and urban lifestyle in Argentina. And tell us a little bit about that, and what are some of the major reasons for what seems like the disconnect there?
Well, rural life is, this is particularly in Mendoza, these places are not that far away. The distance is more like, you can say, let's say in a city where you have very wealthy neighborhoods and you travel for, not that long and you get to really poor neighborhoods. So distances has not much to do with physical distance, but more to injustice and social injustice and difference that relate or create this separation. It was very amazing in the city that is the closest to this area, which is Malargüe. What they know that these families work in the mountains. Many really didn't know. They discover these families through the movie, and they live next to them. So the disparities are analog to other types of disparities of this system, this economic system we live on. So that replicates also in Argentina. And what's mostly happened with them, they are, and it's very interesting because the typical gaucho you heard in the pampas, in the big lands of Argentina, are usually workers that work for the boss, for the owner of the fields. In this case, each one of these families, they own their own animals. They don't work for anybody else, and they are, their own economic unit. Very important for that area. And as I said, there are about 2,000 families working in this area. The problems are always related to an absence of certain help from governments and regulations, like intermediation. So people come and buy a lot of goats for a really low price, and they don't have the options to do their own, even in co-ops or with the helps of the governments, to be able to take those goals and have their own way of processing them and be able to sell them at better price as a group or things like that. So the problem they have is the isolation you see is it's very different in Spain. In Spain, you go anywhere you go in the field, you have cell signal. Over there, it's only the radio, and people only listen one way, and you send messages to them, but they cannot send you message back. So when they are in the high mountains, they are totally isolated. I don't know if I fully answered the question.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, tell us what has happened with Eliseo and his family since you did the film.
It's very interesting. We were with them last weekend because we became very good friends, the two families, so we see each other very often. And he was telling me the story that he was in the horse. This happens all the time now to him. When he is in the winter house, is in a more accessible place, so there are paved roads, and it's an international road. So it's in the mountains, so it's very accessible, and there are many houses there. So many times people go to this very, very small town, and they ask for them to take pictures with them. And he was riding the horse in the middle of the mountains a couple of weeks ago, and this car goes, in the dirt road. There is an international road, though, and he passed him, and 100 meters later, stops and come back. And he said, "Are you Eliseo Parada?" He said, "Yeah." "Oh, I want to take a picture with you. I've been looking forward to take a picture with you." So he became a reference for many people there, because Arreo is a movie that it really is a story told out of admiration, and they feel well represented. So for Eliseo was important in that sense of recognition, but also because he kind of became a voice where politicians listen to him, and he can go to meetings and organize with other people to ask for some reforms. Some happen, some others not. But in that sense, Eliseo's life is the same that it was before, but in many senses it's different because he became kind of a celebrity in the area.
Did the son finish law school?
Excuse me?
Did the son finish law school? One of the sons was in law school and came back. He didn't.
No, unfortunately, he couldn't continue in the university, and that's the problem for many of the young people from those areas, that when they leave the area, usually they don't get the opportunities they would have if they were in the city. And of course, there are many problems, but one of them is definitely economic. It's very hard for them to live to the city and have a sustained, living and be able to study. So he's back. He lives in the town next to where Eliseo is. And as a matter of fact, I was with him last weekend too, because sometimes he goes back and helps his dad.
Gotcha. And so now you're working on a similar film in Spain. So if you would, tell us a little bit about that project, and how does that relate to Arreo?
Well, one thing really fast, I'm going to complete the answer, an answer that a question you asked me and I didn't quite finish, was that you asked me how I made Arreo, and you know that there are different definitions for budget, and there is one that is no budget. Well, this Arreo is no budget, basically. So it's a movie that, I mean, the most, the biggest crew I had was 3 people, and the smallest one was 1, that was me. So the movie was done really, really guerrilla filmmaking. And it was very challenging, physically challenging, because of the heights, because part of the movie I had to do it on horses. So I had to basically run with the horse with the tripod and the camera and reach a point where I want to, shoot them. And they would just go through. And it was like trying to put the tripod before they would pass, because they would wait for me. And then run again to reach them again, in high mountains. So it was hard physically. It was one of the most beautiful experiences that I had in my life, definitely. Every piece of that production, I enjoy it. That's many times what I said to young people or students that want to do documentaries. I never forget to enjoy the process. Stop thinking about the festivals and enjoy the freaking process. Enjoy this, because that's what is important about documentaries, what you live, what you experience. And going to that project was born when I was in a festival in Europe in 2016, because Eliseo told me that he wanted to tell more stories about that. He was very excited about what's happened with the movie. He didn't expect that it would be, so much, would be so well known, and he wanted to tell more story. I was doubting about that, because they said, I don't know if I, do a second part of that, and I didn't work for me. But when I was in Europe in one of the festivals, I realized that this was such a universal subject, and I started learning about more transhumans. I thought about the possibility of joining two goat herders or sheep herders from different parts of the world, because the seasons are the opposite. It's summer here, it's winter here, and the idea was to kind of work these two worlds of people that are, preserving the same thing in very different ways. And that's how we reached to Suso, Jesus Garzón, which is a very well-known activist from the 70s, ambientalist, and he also is the responsible to recuperating all the what is in Spanish is called Cañadas Reales, which is the whole map of the roads from I think is the 13th century, when there was a law to protect those roads, and he got in the 90s to be that law to be reinforced, and now Spain is I think the only country that have like tens of thousands of kilometers of protected roads for transhumans. And so he's a very important activist for transhumans in Spain and in the world. And he admires Eliseo, and Eliseo really admires him too. So we are working on telling the stories of those two worlds and how those two worlds relate to each other. And the idea is that this probably would become a series of documentaries doing this all over the world, looking for people that from two different hemispheres are doing the same thing related to transhumans.
Gotcha. And I believe we have a couple of pictures from the new film we're going to show.
Okay.
Am I correct? Just one photo? Okay, we've got one photo we're going to show. And no, apparently we're not going to show that photo, so that's okay. So now, really quickly, Tato, where are you in the process with the second film? Are you still shooting? Are you in post, or where are you?
No, we are far from post. We did the first part of the film that was Spain, and I'm traveling on December 10 to the mountains here in the Andes for maybe until Christmas, probably, for the first trip going up, because it's the time that he's taking the goats up to the highlands. No, we're in the process of still shooting, and I think we'll start post-production.
And there's the photo.
In next year, yeah.
There's the photo you gave us of the herd in the square in Madrid. And if I remember correctly, Tato, you said that's 1,000 goats?
Yeah, it's 1,000 sheep. And
sheep.
Yeah, it's different. They're all Merinas sheep, which is the very valuable lana. Sorry,
yes.
The word in English doesn't come to me now, but there are sheep and 1,000 sheep and 100 goats, and that's a very impressive photo. We were shooting from a high place in what is called La Fuente de Cibeles in Madrid, and we went. We actually started north of Spain, and we went for about a month going through Spain. Going through fields, but also through small towns. And this ends on the, center of Madrid one Sunday. And few days, not few days, I think it was like 9, Ted would help me. And I want to say something about this because friends from all over the world came to help in this project. And one of them, some people from Italy, from Ireland, from Austria, came to help me. I was by myself most of the time until the last week that my sound guy and the second camera came for the last part of the movie. But many people came to help, like renting a car and helping me to go forward and reach the group to shooting from different angles and things like that. And one of them was Ted Parks, that he travels to Spain. He rented a car and he was helping. It was an amazing big help that I always be very grateful to.
And so I've taken up an awful lot of time here, so I want to throw it open and see if Andy or Yuri have any questions.
Yuri, go ahead.
Yeah, well, more than a question, I think, Tato, do you think that you had some inclination to do this type of content always, or what triggered that?
I don't know if I would say what type of content. I don't think I could even define that. I would say that I couldn't make any documentary that I don't have a passion for the subject. It's like, it's very interesting when you go to festivals, especially to markets, no? Everybody saying, what's your next project? What's your next project? No? And they say, I don't know what is my next project. I'm not thinking about my next project. So, I'm not making candies. It's like, I need to feel the story. I need to have a real passion to tell that story. So, I would say there are a couple of things that drives me to tell the story is, first, when I see the need of making something visible, because it's invisible. People are not reaching that amazing story that is worth it to tell. And it's something that moved me. And that's basically how that starts. And then, well, there are many other aspects that sometimes you keep going, and you can do it, and many times you can't. But basically, I don't think there is a specific subject, but always is something that moves me, and as a human being, I feel touched, and I want to share with other people, basically.
And you realize you're fortunate in a way to decide what you actually get to do. Because it's up to you what you identify as worth portraying through a film, and that's something that perhaps in the United States is not something that every filmmaker can afford to do.
Well, I think what happens for me was easier to make documentaries here, but also because I think it has to do with the stories that I can tell better. And I always think that that's why I said that we should be putting these tools in many more hands, because we have many more interesting stories, because the stories are being told by the people that live them. I think are always the best stories we can tell are the ones that are close to us, because we know them. I feel like that. But I don't know if it's about, it's more difficult. Argentina has a good system of subsidies, and there is a lot of money put into films, although in my case, I did it totally independent. But I basically don't make my living with the documentaries. I make my living producing and content. But it's not only the documentaries. I also rather choose to make documentaries than doing documentaries, because I have to make a living with that. I don't know if that explains it.
And we'll jump up. Andy, do you have anything you want to ask?
I think we're out of time.
Yeah, I think we are, but they have not flashed the flashlight at me yet, so Cameron said keep going until I see the flashlight. So,
Cameron, do we have a hard out, or we still have time? Well,
I would like to have a question from Andy.
I'm sorry. All I would like to say is that Ario is a fantastic film. The cinematography is just spectacular, and you have so many intimate moments in that film that are just incredibly memorable. And the people sleeping under the truck with the dogs and the wind, and the one line that to me is emblematic of the question posed here regarding the what's happening with the rural and the city dynamics is one of the sons says the city is like an unknown horse, and the point is not to fear it and to move forward. And I live in a rural area here in Tennessee in the hills. We're actually undergoing very similar things, where there are farmers that have been there for many generations, and their sons, even here in the Nashville area, are now looking at whether they should continue the farming or whether they should move on to, going to college and that kind of thing. Anyway, it's a fantastic film. Very honored to talk to you. And someday I'd like to talk to you about having met Armando Robles Godoy and Alejandro Jodorowsky in 1993. Thank you very much.
Really?
Thank you. Both of them, they were traveling. They were in Chicago in 1993, Jodorowsky and Armando Robles Godoy. But anyway, very nice meeting you.
And Sarah.
Me too. Thank you very much, Andy. And I would like to add a couple of things. First of all, that I hope to be there in April. It's going to be great to meet all of you in person. And also regarding the songs in Arreo, those songs, the ones that he sings completely, and even including the one at the end, they were composed by Eliseo while we were doing the movie. He was creating those songs, and those songs were recorded live in the mountains. And we tried to make a CD later in the studio, because he wanted to have the experience. So we went to studio and we recorded, and we never used it because it would never sound like when he sing it in the mountains. But those songs were created by him. Only the incidental music was created for other composers. And also all the decimas, which is all the verses he improvised. I found out about that early before we started shooting the film. So I said, I'm going to give you a microphone. I put a Sennheiser there and say, elábale, and say, when you feel like you want to say one of those verses, just turn on the mic and let me know. And that's how it comes up. All of those were never planned, never written. There was these moments that he feels he want to say it, and he learned very fast to use the microphone, and we would shoot it. But he was in control. So.
And I believe we have some questions that have come in online, so we're going to throw it over to Sarah.
Well, hi, Tato. It's so good to see you.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi. Sending you a hug. So I want to open it up to questions from the audience. We do have a couple that have come in online. I want to ask the first one. How do we stay connected to you, and how do we continue to watch your work, participate in your work, be a part of your work? How do we stay informed?
Well, you're already part of the family, I tell you.
Well, thank you.
Because, as I said, I feel like amazed at all the things that I'm getting from all of you in Nashville. We are going to continue working in this project, and we'll try to create, and we did with Arreo. Arreo now with YouTube has like 3.5 million views. And Claudia, my wife, that is also the producer, she's continuously answered questions from people from all over the world. And we are creating a community around Arreo. And we want to continue building a community about transhumans. And also because this movie is also being made with no any subsidies or anything like this, more independently, is we going to start next year a crowdfunding with all that community to continue and be able to finish the film next year on 2022. And a good way to contact us all the time is if you go to Arreo in YouTube, Claudia is always answering there, or I was answering in the Arreo doc in Facebook, where we have the most activities from people interacting with us, and it's very interesting if you go to YouTube to read the comments. They're really interesting things from remote parts of the world.
Do we have any questions from the audience? And while we're waiting for her to come up, I'll go ahead and ask. Tell us one lesson you learned from the first film that you applied to shooting the second one.
Be patient.
Be patient. I need to learn that one.
I learned that. But I learned it for life, because those things you learn making a documentary are a lesson for life. And then I learned that the process is more important that when you finish or where you get, because where you get is part of is the consequence of the process. And so if you are so focused in the end, and the problem is mostly in our society, we are so driven by results that we totally are, forgetting to live. I mean, when I say to live, is to enjoy what is happening in the present, because they're so concerned about what's going to happen at the end. So, and we know what's going to happen at the end to all of us. That's the real end. Besides that, who cares? It's very important to enjoy the process.
Yeah, thank you for that. And throw it over to you if you'll tell us who you are and then ask your question.
Hola, Tato. Soy Lorraine.
Hola.
¿Sí me acuerdas?
Lorraine,
¿Te acuerdas?
¿cómo estás?
¿Cómo estás, querido? Well, something that I wanted to tell you more than a question is I wanted to thank you for showing the other perspective of what is a gaucho. Because usually that image of a gaucho is someone that it's tall and well fit and it has this outfit that is a macho type of man, right? And with Eliseo, he is someone that is, it doesn't mean that he is not someone that is strong, but at the same time, you are showing a view, a perspective of a male that is fighting for something that is right, that is fighting for an area that, like you said, the government in many occasions, and we can see that through history, does not pay attention to. So to me, that is very important. I wanted to thank you for that. And my question to you is, where is your partner in crime? What is Claudia? Because we know that it's important to have all of those people that work with you, doing all of those things that we do in the back. Where is she? I'd like to see her. What is Claudia?
Well, she is really reluctant to show up, and he actually asked me to point the camera so she's not going to be seen, but she's listening to you. So I hope she comes here because she doesn't like it at all. But I hope she's listening now. So I hope she shows up at least at the end. So Claudia, we're waiting for you.
Perfect.
So, I would say this: without Claudia, none of this project would be possible. Absolutely. None. And because of the way also we did it, she's coming. Okay, Claudia. She's here.
Hello. Thank you. I'm listening to all of you.
No, she doesn't like the camera, I told you.
Have any other questions? I think Sarah has another online question.
It would be possible without Claudia. I don't know. Sorry.
Do you have another online question, Sarah? Or do we have any other audience questions?
Oh, I have something for Lorraine, so that I forgot to tell.
Okay, well, go ahead and do that one then. What you
says.
You have
It's
a
really
question?
fast. It's really fast. I just wanna thank Lorraine
Come
because
back, Lorraine.
talking to Yuri today when they called me in 2020 for that meeting. I know that the one that found me and decided and chose that I should be invited was Lorraine. So thank you very much. I mean, it's been an amazing trip since that October 2020.
Thank you for your work. So if it wasn't because of your work, I wouldn't be able to find you. So thank you.
Okay, and Sarah, you have another online question. Do we have any other audience questions?
Anyone else? Last call?
Because if not, there's...
Okay, so we had one more. We had a lot of questions come in, actually. A lot of them were answered during the show. So this question I thought was really interesting because I think it speaks to the heart of sister cities and connecting people, and that you don't have to travel to travel. So what is something that you learned about your own culture in Argentina on the film when you were working on Arreo that you didn't know before?
I think I learned a lot of things in that, specifically in that project. And one thing that interests me a lot when I start a new documentary is how I start discovering things where I was wrong, basically. And I remember one specifically. When I start thinking about that Arreo, that had a different name at the beginning, and then it changed to Arreo, I had this total black and white position about, young people shouldn't leave we have to do something so they don't leave the rural areas and go to the city. And then I start seeing that wasn't the problem. The problem was for them not to have the freedom of choosing and staying or leaving, because there was nothing wrong with leaving if they want to do it. The problem is that they're obligated to leave. And I wouldn't learn that if I wouldn't go inside the process and I would listen to them and really understand them. There is a specific scene in the almost at the end of the movie when father and son talked next to the fire. And it was amazing when I shot it because I was really moved for it. Because his son he left to the city 3 years before that scene. And for 3 years, he wouldn't do this job. And he asked me to do it because of the documentary. He wanted to go back with his dad. And that scene is a recognition of both of them, that the life of the other, and acceptance. And that acceptance happened that night. And I think it's also the power of documentary. Because his son, that was kind of bitter with the rural lives, and he went to the city, he started recognizing his father more when he started seeing on the screen and value more his life. And at the same time, his dad started accepting his son that he had the right to live that way of living because he actually can choose. So many things that I learned had to do with the way that I see it from the city. And when I went in, I really started understanding that life.
Well, Thank you for doing this. And why don't you put a button on this by telling us this? If you could go back and tell your younger your younger filmmaker self one thing, what would it be? Tough one.
We may have a technical problem.
Yeah, what piece of advice would you go back and give your young filmmaker self? Or what piece, or let me put it another way. What would be the number one piece of advice you would give a filmmaker starting out today? Did we lose him? I think we lost him. Bye, Tato.
We may have some internet.
Yeah.
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 I cannot hear anything.
I cannot hear anything of what's happening now.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
From John.
Oh, whoops.
Me neither. Yeah. I can hear you. I can hear you, Tato, but
And I
that's all.
can hear you, but I cannot
okay.
hear them.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Okay. Hey, Tato, put a button on this by telling what would be the one piece of advice that you would give a young filmmaker? What do they need to know starting this business?
So, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question for me, please?
Okay, can you hear me? I think you lost me again.
Sorry, you said that, what advice?
Yeah, what advice would you give a young filmmaker?
There is one in particular that I think is very important, related with anything you want to do, is don't try to be original, try to be honest. I think it's way more important. We teach young people on film schools a lot of about formats and what it sells, what it's not, and what people will like, instead of trying to drive young people to tell stories that really moves them. I think that would be my advice.
Okay, well, thank you for doing this. We've kept you far longer than we said we would. You're a wonderful person and a wonderful filmmaker, and we can't wait to see you here in Nashville.
Oh, it would be absolutely my pleasure to be there, and I'm really grateful from all of you. It's been an amazing journey since I started meeting all of you, so I'm really thankful. Maybe I take too long to answer questions. That's a little bit of the Argentinian way, I think.
Well, as the moderator, I'll let you keep going. It was fascinating information. So we look forward to seeing you again, and I think that's our show, folks. Thank you for coming.